Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Climate Pioneers. I'm Heather Clancy, editor-at-large at Trellis. And joining me today is Deanna Bratter. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Crocs. Now, Crocs has a very interesting environmental challenge. They sell more than 150 million clogs a year, but those shoes are made of plastic predominantly. And addressing that and getting to net zero is Deanna's primary task. So Deanna, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. One of the things I wanted to start with is just why you left your former job at Danone North America, where you were dealing with yogurt and milk, and what prompted you to make the leap over to Crocs?
It's been a really exciting journey and a big transition. I spent the vast majority of my career in the food space, and Danone is a phenomenal company with a great mission. We certified as the largest B Corp in North America at the time I was there.
Yeah.
And through that journey, I started to really think about making impact in sustainability. And do I want to be an expert in food, or do I want to be an expert in sustainability? So I started thinking, what other industries are in need of change and where can I apply my skills? And really just trying to expand my horizons. And when you think about sustainability in the food space, you think about upstream agriculture, things like regenerative agriculture. But then the waste is the package. And when you start getting into fashion and footwear, the product is part of the problem.
Yeah.
What you're left with at the end is what you started with. And so shifting from sort of end of life thinking around packaging into holistic thinking around consumption and end of life your product has been really interesting and a huge challenge that I was excited to take on.
I want to get into the circularity, the end of life thing in a moment, but just to go back to the one of your sort of headline goals, if you will, you are changing the material for Crosslight, which is the material. She's got these great Crocs on. I don't know if you can see them, but from predominantly petroleum-based plastic to bio-based. I think your goal is at least 50% by 2030.
That's right.
And you said in 2024 that you're about halfway there towards that. So I guess I'm wondering, like, what that is as how big is that goal? Like, how hard is that?
Yeah. So material goals are really important in the footwear industry and specifically for Crocs. So 80% of the total materials we purchase are Crosslight, which is our proprietary blend of materials that are plastic derivatives, EVA, and others. And when we looked across our carbon footprint, materials and manufacturing are the biggest levers in order to meet our net zero by 2040 goal and find reduction. So we really started to focus in on how can we innovate and take our materials and look at it both through an opportunity lens to reduce the impact of the material and also to reduce the carbon emissions associated with it. So this came the innovation working with material providers around bio-based and what we refer to as biocircular material. And so bio-based made from plants and biocircular made from plant sources that already lived their first life. So our best example of that is cooking oil. It's created and used as cooking oil, and then it becomes a waste stream. And so we're able to capture that cooking oil and turn it into essentially a drop-in where we didn't need to retool or change our production, but we're using a input that is made from plant oils instead of made from fossil oils. So pretty incredible in terms of an innovation, but also a carbon reduction.
Yeah. So how did you negotiate the relationship needed to get that biocircular input, right? So where did you find it?
Yeah. So existing supplier relationships. So we're really fortunate in today's world. A lot of the big suppliers, manufacturing suppliers, input material providers also have goals around sustainability and carbon. So finding that shared value and that common ground and working through an innovation lens with our main suppliers and then seeking new ones so that we can create a more competitive market, because like many biocircular or biomaterials and alternatives, they often come at a premium. So it's really important that we have a diverse supply, a robust supply, so that we can continue working toward our 50% goal.
When you think about the connection between plastic and emissions reductions, like not a lot, we know we talk about plastic as this thing to address and we talk about emissions as this thing to address, but a lot of people don't connect the dots. So when you're working on this changes, how is that changing your footprint, no pun intended, on the emissions side. How did you connect the dots?
Yeah. A really important piece of this is measurable change. We set a goal to reduce 50% emissions per pair of classic clogs. And then we have this goal for 50% biocircular material, and they go hand in hand. So we've done in the past LCAs, we're doing them internal now and creating more tools so that we can measure and leverage it as a decision-making tool. What we published in 2024 was 2.02 kilograms of carbon per pair of classic clogs. That's about equivalent to the emissions associated with 2 gallons of gas. And I like to say that because think about how far, if you drive a gas car still,
Guilty.
Think about how far 2 gallons of gas get you in a car, but think about how far a pair of Crocs can get you with that same amount of emissions. They can last a really long time and take you really far. And so it's pretty low carbon footprint overall. And that 2.02 is about a 20% reduction from where we started. So we're on a great path. The 25% biomaterial, we were able to equate with a 6% reduction per pair. So it's having a direct one-to-one tie. The more biomaterial, the less carbon emissions. And measuring that's really important to us so that we can continue to make progress and continue to invest, and then hopefully continue to tell the story with consumers who care about sustainability.
Yeah. You keep mentioning classic.
Yes.
Why are you making that distinction?
So the classic clog is our icon.
Okay.
I think it's probably a little inside speak, but the classic clog is that iconic clog that when someone says Crocs, you imagine and picture. But our entire portfolio uses at least some level of cross-lite. So that's exciting because the innovation can really be applied holistically across the business.
How did you have to change the processes to handle this? Like you mentioned, it was a drop-in. So did you have to make changes in manufacturing? Like how did you engage with other allies within the organization to make those changes?
Yeah, so a lot of stakeholders across the organization. I think the biggest changes we made were in the management of the practice. So the way that we're going about the integration of the material, we wanted to make sure we had a third-party certification. So we have ISCC plus bio circular certification on this product so that we can make a claim and that we have the accounting all aligned. So a lot of the biggest changes were how we measure and manage the biomaterial that comes in, how we track it through the process, getting into the product so that we can have reporting and have that third-party validation. So a lot of folks from the materials team to the manufacturing teams have to partner to make sure that documentation and that process is really organized and clean so that we can certify and audit and everything that comes with that.
And so I'm going to date us. It's 2025, early 2025. 2030 goal, does it get harder now?
It does get harder in the sense that it's more expensive. So that's a big piece of this. Want to be transparent that Crocs is investing and making a conscious decision to invest. But the capability and the opportunity for the clogs and the material is there. And then it's getting more creative. So we've got a solution for our main material. How do we input solutions across our greenhouse gas footprint as a whole, our corporate footprint, and really be driving changes not just in the materials, but manufacturing, transportation and distribution, and through the supply chain where the vast majority of our emissions are. So the challenge persists, absolutely, but I think incremental progress when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and ensuring the company is taking steps that are right-sized and aligned with the business is really important.
How did you get product designers on board?
Yeah. Product designers are amazing because they have a ton of enthusiasm and they're really creative. So in thinking about sort of bridging to some of the work we're doing on circularity, our product designers help sort of vision what can we do with the shreds that we get when we take Crocs back from consumers. And so the product team helped innovate. We launched a Keep It Going Classic Clog. And the idea of Keep It Going is take old Crocs back and keep the material going in process. So the Keep It Going Classic has that 25% biocircular material, and it also has 25% recycled material from shoes we've taken back through our program.
So do you use both labels, if you will, when you talk about how, what's in them?
Yes. It's a little tricky because we want to be so sensitive to green claims and, making sure we're being really transparent. And the 25% is in that specific shoe and the 25% biocircular is across all of our
It's a
Crocs-Lite
mass balance,
portfolio.
yeah.
So we're really intentional about how we make those claims together, but really keep them separate and are able to sort of certify and disclose specifics about each one.
Do you actually have a label, like a carbon label? What's in it?
We don't have a carbon label on the shoes, but the certification label itself is tied to
How
the
do you
shoes.
talk about this? I mean, is this something that you market?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we found is we know Crocs consumers, one of their key factors in sticking with Crocs and loving Crocs is comfort. And so we didn't want to talk about sustainability for the sake of sustainability. We wanted to talk about it in terms of same comfort you know and love, now a little bit better. And so our last campaign was around feels good is good, now made with 25% biocircular material. So really anchoring in that idea that you're not losing anything. And the way that we're approaching this across our portfolio is making it accessible to consumers. We're already a pretty accessible shoe from a price point perspective, and you can find Crocs on red carpets and, fun moments there, but you can also find them in gardens or hiking up mountains as a good rest your feet, shoe after a big hike. And so they're everywhere. And the idea that sustainability should be accessible and it should be a given, and that companies are willing to do the work alongside consumers. We're really proud of that, and keeping this idea of delightfully democratic, we say, with a lowercase d, is one of our core values, and kind of bringing sustainability through that.
So I want to follow up on a couple of things you said in your earlier answers. One is the investment, right? So how does Crocs justify this investment? Who had to be involved with saying, yes, we're going to do this. We know that it might cost X more.
Yeah.
How'd you get the people on board?
Yeah, I think we set goals, and then we, there's some who are bottom up. Here's all the ways that we can reduce. What kind of goal can we set? There's some folks and companies who set goals and say, okay, now let's figure out how to get there. Crocs was a bit of a blend. We knew materials were a key unlock, and we know that innovation is sort of core to who we are. So when this opportunity came up in partnership with those suppliers, there was conversations from everyone from the materials and the product teams all the way to the executive team saying, what's the opportunity here? And we also know that data tells us consumers care. They care more and more than they ever have. We don't necessarily see that care translating into spend and investment. And that's true across industries. But we want to meet consumers where they're going and connecting with consumers at their values. We're a brand grounded in come as you are, self-expression, showing up as your unique self. And meeting you at your values of I care about the planet, I want to do good with the purchases I make is important to us. So that was really a core piece of the alignment.
You could have chosen just to do like, hey, this is our biocircular Crocs. So why is it so important that you're trying to do this across your entire product line?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the idea of delightfully democratic a bit. Of we have a unique product where we have this primary material, and we can really make it accessible and make the impact across the portfolio, which is a really great story. We're not saying, hey, consumers, if you're interested in sustainability, buy this, or if you can afford sustainability, buy this. We're saying we all believe it's important, so we're just making our shoes better, and you can feel good about buying Crocs in general. And to your point, it has this sort of overarching, like, is it a plastic shoe? And as a consumer, do I want to buy a plastic shoe in a culture where we're focused on waste and, increasing concerns? And so it's a way that we can make sure that we're doing right by our product and our consumer.
Tell me more about the take back program. So what is the goal of that? Is it to get the product back so it can be shredded? I have a friend that has lots of Crocs. I don't see her giving them up, honestly.
We do have some collectors out there.
Yeah. But what's the mission, if you will, the expectation, the mission for that program?
Yeah. So the footwear industry as a whole produces more than 20 billion pairs of shoes a year.
Many of which don't even get to consumers.
Absolutely. We're at 7.5, nearing 8 billion people on the planet. So we're producing a lot of shoes every year. And I think when you step back and say, we're 150 million pairs a year, we're a small, but mighty piece of that is sort of what's our responsibility as a producer to creating product that stays out in the world. And again, with a consumer connection of like, do you feel good when you have waste and have to throw a pair of shoes out and they end up in the landfill, or send them off to Goodwill and being unsure sort of where they end up. So it's an opportunity to take responsibility, to connect. And I think we have retail stores. So we have a take back program in 160 retail stores across the US and Canada. And we offer a mail-in option too at no cost to consumers. And we're like, we can take them back. It's a really incredible material, so we can get them back. And they don't just go into recycling. One of the other things is there's more than 500 million people without shoes that they need to live school, work, life around the world. So when we get back shoes, we actually go through a sorting process and say, if they're wearable, we're going to keep them on feet, and we're going to partner with the nonprofit Souls for Souls, and they get them into a program around socioeconomic development, specifically for women entrepreneurs, where they can take those shoes and create micro markets in their own communities and use that as a long-term economic development opportunity. And then if they're not wearable, they're past their, best life, we can shred them, and then we can use that material for lots of use cases. Specifically, the more we can keep them into new shoes, the more of a closed loop circle that we can create. But there's lots of other uses for the shreds too that we're exploring.
Now, you joined about 3 years ago. The targets had been set before you joined. I'm curious, did you have leeway to say, hey, we might want to change this? When you joined, what was the expectation? That you were going to come in and manage this goal, or that you were going to come in and manage the goal, but maybe change it if you needed to?
Yeah, I was really excited to come into a company who sort of set its vision and knew where it was going. And I was actually the first sort of formal sustainability leader that Crocs has had. It's a pretty young company, just over 20 years old. So coming in and sort of being the first formal role, a lot of the work prior was done by committee, really passionate people who had, taken some leadership in some of the programs. And so the opportunity I had was really to assess, okay, what have we said so far, and how can we really credibly and authentically get there? That's incredibly important to me, is making sure that we set the path and that we have sort of a clear vision. Now, that's not without challenges and bumps in the road. And so the deeper I got in, the more I was like, we need time for transformation and to really figure out what's best. So we did take a look at some of the goals and make some adjustments, but we're really proud of the progress we've made against those goals. And I think there's a lot of companies out there coming up on 2025 and 2030 who might know they're not going to make it, and they're just waiting till the end. And I said, let's be proactive and say, what's realistic for us? What can we put in place? So we've recently published our carbon roadmap, really starting to identify some of the levers and opportunities that we can, decisions we can make to get to reductions. And so just trying to get more clear and be really thoughtful about our approach.
Who do you report to?
I report to the CEO.
And who are your primary allies?
Yeah, so I love a sustainability sort of hub and spoke model. I have a team of 7, and I have a person focused on social impact. They work very closely with employees, with HR, with engagement and marketing. I have a person focused on reporting who works very closely with legal and audit and risk and SEC teams. And then I have a product and a climate person who work really closely with manufacturing, production, a sourcing person. So I really love making sure that we have a very well-rounded, that we are touching every team in the business, and that they have a go-to on the team to draw those connections and bring ideas and sort of implement from the strategy that we're building for the business. So I think it's so important that we have a holistic way of engaging and being a partner with everyone across the organization, which is a big remit, but it's a sweet spot for sustainability so we can influence with the greatest amount of success.
So what's different between the food and footwear industries as a sustainability person? What's the same? 3 years in, what are some of your ahas or learnings?
Yeah, I mean, the issues are the issues: climate, waste, water, energy. And so that has been a really easy transition. The supply chains are both complicated in their own ways, working with farmers, supporting farmers with agriculture versus working with supply chain overseas in manufacturing environments, really connecting with the people who are making your product, whether it's upstream in ag or in production, is critically important. And so I think there's more similarities than there are differences. And I think creativity is the thread of what is the challenge for this brand? What's going to connect, and really keep it connected to the business strategy itself. Crocs is high growth and really exciting, fast-paced company. And so I think really keeping connected with the business strategy to make sustainability most successful.
I'm going to do a couple quick rounds of leadership and word association questions.
Awesome.
Starting with the word association. So I'm going to say a word. You tell me what comes into your mind, like 5 words or less.
Okay.
You ready?
All right, let's do it.
Resistance.
Flow.
Action.
Force for good.
Joy.
I could say my middle name, but maybe community. Yeah.
Good one. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Ally.
Change makers for collective action. Is that 5-ish? Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Hero.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say something around collective good, collective action. Mm-hmm. That's what hero feels like to me.
Okay. Who do you consult for a reality check?
I have a 16-year-old daughter. That is a really good reality check, both on a pulse of what's happening in the world, sort of where things are going from a trend perspective, and also to keep me grounded in what matters most.
Mm-hmm. What one question do you ask every potential hire?
I like to change it up, but I think a really powerful question is what is one project that energizes you? And what are types of projects that drain you? To really get a sense of sort of like what excites people. Are they drained by data? Are they excited by data? And sort of how does that fit in with the role?
On that vein, how do you recharge your batteries?
I love, blessed with an amazing family, love family time, but I really love live music. So I try to get as much of that to fill my bucket as I can.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to a new CSO?
There is a balance between head down internal work and head up being part of the world around you, and keeping that in mind as you plan for short term and keep your eye on the long-term vision.
And what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Keep following your heart.
Great. Yeah. Deanna, thank you so much for joining us on Climate Pioneers.
Thanks for the conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks for tuning in and eavesdropping on my interview. I appreciate all of you.